What's the word, YouTube fam? Welcome back. I'm your host, Jay Wade, and you are now tuning into Wait a Minute TV. So, today I wanted to give you all my review of Silo Season 2, Episode 7, entitled The Dive. In this episode, we really do go on a deep dive, and I have a couple of theories off rip on why I even think they entitled this show the Dive, because I don't think it's solely about Juliet's experience. But we'll get to that in a moment. Without further ado, let's just jump right in. The episode starts with Bernard and Lucas. And as we saw in the previous episode, Bernard had made Lucas his shadow. And now, as his shadow, he is showing Lucas what he refers to as the legacy, which is basically the archives of human history. And what he is doing is he's presenting to Lucas uh, the fact that he has a problem, and Lucas puts it together real quick without him even, further explaining. Is that Bernard's problem that needs to be solved is that he knows how long the silo has been operating, which is what he said is about 352 years ago. But he doesn't know why the silo was created. And Bernard believes that through breaking Salvador Quinn's code, he'll figure out what the answers are. And that conversation alone just gave us a plethora of things to take in. The fact that these silos were even created, right, without explaining why, just draws you right in right away. Why would who the people who created them not want to tell what happened before and why they were created? So that's something that immediately stuck out to me. Uh, then we go into Mechanical exposing IT, right? What they ended up doing was they shot what we seemingly thought was a bomb or an explosive up through the roof of the silo. And what spouted out of it was not, an explosion, but was a myriad or a plethora of papers that pretty much talked about, how IT has been lying to, the silo, and basically pinning the blame of Judge Meadows, pinning the blame of Judge Meadows' murder on Mechanical. And that's when they shut the lights out on Bernard, and the whole silo goes dark, but the only lights that stay on are the lights of Bernard's office, which paints Bernard out to be a pretty bad guy in this situation. And you can clearly see like Bernard is losing it. He's kind of losing his cool, losing his temper. He's trying to keep it together, but you can clearly tell something is baking him, right? With the fact that they just exposed him. And then we move on to Judge Sims' wife, who is trying to ensure that he secures his number one spot again in his quest to become the shadow uh, to Bernard, which is why, he didn't sign off on a warrant, which she explains to him later that, you know, if you go to Bernard, then he has you in his pocket. But if you get Bernard to come to you, then you can negotiate. You have some kind of leverage. And it's later revealed that, when we'll get to this more in detail in a bit, but it's later revealed that she was going behind Judge Sims back to kind of pull some strings to manipulate Bernard into believing a certain narrative in order for Bernard to decide to come to Judge Sims. And I thought that that was really creative, although I don't think Judge Sims really handled her going behind his back like that well. Although I feel like she had a good reason to, and she did mean well by doing that. Then we go into Solo, who has, literally a breakdown in front of Juliet because Juliet is literally trying to get out of his silo. She doesn't want to do the deep dive for him, even though he has essentially saved her life. She doesn't want to do any kind of deep dive for him. And he's like, you're my only hope to saving this silo. I messed up, my whole silo's dead. If you can at least drain this water, I know at least I will have done something good for this silo. With him being basically the sole runner of his own silo. And I thought that that was very interesting because it goes into, his mental, basically into his psychological reasoning and basically into just how he thinks of himself in the events, that transpired of, the demise of his silo. And, with him being pretty much with him being separated for so long from all just humanity in general, you see that he still has that guilt. He still has that kind of I would want to call it like, basically just that transparency about himself and how he failed. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Then we get into the two sheriffs. I can't remember their names right now. But they interrogated Martin about why, or about not why, but who poisoned the food, and reveals there's a plot to kill Shirley and Knox, who they're like the spearhead leaders of the rebellion in Mechanical. And so, um, you know, they ended up figuring it out through Martin. And we'll get back to that later because I want to kind of get into Sims and Bernard's face off, and how they exposed each other. Bernard is completely and has been completely fed up with Sims since Sims went behind his back and set some things up to kind of make things look away towards Judge Meadows, right? Which ultimately, if you've seen episode 6, was the reason why Bernard ended up killing Judge Meadows. And he goes on to say, basically, Sims, I didn't never want to see you again. You made me kill somebody who I had an extreme affection for. And I'm just not with it, right? And so Sims then rebuttals like, I gave you a decade of my life. There's something that we both, or I at least thought we both had an understanding on, was that I would be your shadow. And that's what he's telling Bernard. And Bernard's like, yeah, but see, the thing about my shadow is my shadow needs to have a level of curiosity in which you don't have, which is really a stinger because if you look at Sims, he is loyal, but the curiosity isn't there because I think his mentality was to take orders so that he could show his value, so he could show his loyalty, and that's how he shows his value. But that's when Judge Sims goes on to say to Bernard that, hey, you're running out of people who you can trust. I was one of the only people who were loyal to you, right? And all the other people that you have on your team, I don't know if they even loyal to you. And you're also running out of moves as well, which Bernard then sends, shots back and basically explains to uh, Sims that, hey, you and your wife obviously don't have loyalty between each other because she didn't tell you she went behind your back to protect Shirley and Knox. And that's what Bernard leaves it at that and puts Sims in a really tough pickle, like in a really like tough situation. And now he's like, man, just second guessing everything. So then I want to move on to Lucas and how Lucas breaks the code and realizes the cipher isn't alphabetical. It's more so of a numerical code, right? And he then tells Bernard that the cipher wouldn't show up in the books or in the archives, um, but it would show up probably in an older book that wouldn't be in the archives, wouldn't be in the legacy. And then he asked Bernard, could you think of anybody who would have a relic that old, right? And uh, pretty much Bernard's like, yeah, I only know of one person who, when I look back at it now, I'm almost positive was Judge Meadows. Bernard says, yeah, I know somebody who would have had that relic, and I have it now. And so what Bernard does is he hands a book to Lucas, and that book ends up being The Wizard of Oz. And when I saw that, that immediately my that immediate my immediate reaction was that they gave me chills, right? Like just straight up chills, because it's such a fitting story. If you know anything about The Wizard of Oz, which I'm sure most of you all do, but it's a very fitting story to what is going on in the silo right now. I do truly look at Bernard as the wizard and how he's losing the facade of control and of order, and that the power that he once had as the leader or the controller of the silo is now slowly fading, because now it's looking like the citizens of Oz, so to speak, are catching on. And I thought that that story was very fitting. That it would be ironic that he'd hand that book to Lucas, considering the fact that those stories are so similar. Um, and so pretty much after that, I want to get into talking a little bit about the dive. So Juliet, of course, finally decides, hey, you know what? I just need my suit back. Let me go ahead and get this dive over, and we gonna do what it do. So she goes in, she does the dive, and pretty much she finishes everything. Solo, helps her out through the whole thing, and then she rings the bell for Solo to lift her back up, right? And lo and behold, which I already felt it was coming. Lo and behold, Solo doesn't lift her back up, right? And in that, I'm already thinking like, man, she gonna have to kill folks. Like she gonna have to kill him because he left out hanging to dry. Mind you, she's like what, like 300 feet underwater, and he's her only salvation as far as she knows to lift her up out of the water. So she ends up almost like panicking and ends up almost losing her life because she's now, racing against the clock to pull herself up out of 300 feet of water to essentially, gain some oxygen again, right? And once she finally does narrowly escape her, watery abyss of a death, uh, she ends up finding out that um, Solo is no longer up there, right? Um, she's looking around for Solo, doesn't find him, and then she sees what looked to me to be an axe, and then she also sees um, pretty much some blood going up the stairs, right? And for the most part, now we're, or at least in my opinion, I'm wondering like, okay, so did somebody kidnap Solo, right? And that's what I'm assuming happened. We don't know because it was pretty much where they left the episode off of, and that's pretty much the end of the episode. But my thoughts are, I think this, all in all, this show or this episode was referred to as the dive because not only was it referring to Juliet diving into, the watery abyss, but it's also referring to just how much of a dive into a rabbit hole the secrets that are being revealed goes, right? Like, how deep does this rabbit hole go into the secrecy of these silos? That's what the real dive is. And when you see that this is pretty much revealing those secrets, it starts to get you to think like, um, what is control, right? Do people really ever truly have control, or is it all just an illusion? Um, there are some other storylines about how Bernard ends up, finding out that the two ladies, I can't remember their names, sorry, don't eat me up in the comments, but the two ladies who were married 25 years ago, Bernard finds out about them. And I think that Bernard's going to use that story, or not story, but their um, love for each other as leverage to get them to do what he needs them to do. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the entire episode. I think this show is phenomenal. I definitely thought that this episode was phenomenal. You could kind of tell this episode was going to be phenomenal just based off of the trailer alone. And pretty much, um, I'm excited to see what's going to happen next week. I do have a theory though, right? I think that these silos are connected, and there have been hints of, that throughout, season 1 and 2 of this entire series. I think that there may be another way into every silo, and that they are all connected. And I don't think Juliet is gonna even need that suit come the end of this season. She's probably going to find a tunnel way from her silo to another silo. Um, and I'm also I'm also thinking that Judge Sims, he may eventually, I don't know entirely, but he may eventually decide to join the rebels. And the reason I think that is because he's already been on one side, right? He's already been on the side of justice. He's already pretty much um, been on the side of like, hey, or not, I don't even want to call it justice, but power, right? And he's already been like, hey, I've trusted you all and gave my life and dedicated my life to you all, and you all turned your back on me. So I think he may just hear out the rebels and may join them. Although, it was revealed that in this episode, his wife is thinking, hey, let's play both sides, right? which I can understand that, right? Let's play both sides. We don't know which side is really going to, hit the lottery of control, so to speak. But let's see how this turns out, and whichever way this swings, we're gonna make sure it swings in our favor. But I think it's gonna end up swinging in the favor of the rebels ultimately. So, um, that's my review. Let me know what you all think down in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe, and yeah, man. Look, you're gonna see me next week for you know, episode 8. But until next time, YouTube fam, I'm out.